Minister is a very critical office. It coordinates, supervises government ministries, agencies and departments. The leader of the Prime Minister under Article 108A is empowered to coordinate this very important office. Alongside the Prime Minister are a host of other ministers who play a very critical role in the office of the Prime Minister. Welcome to Citizen Voices this evening, our viewers who are watching us in every pocket of the country. Our hashtag is Amplifying Citizen Voices, and we have a panel of two, our regular panelist, Marie Nanyanzi, good to have you here, and the Acting Permanent Secretary, James Collins Dombo. But before we bring them in to have this discussion and interrogate a number of issues, including research that we've gathered from the field, let us first get the views of the public in these vox pops that we gathered for you. Thank you.
Omwaka oguwedde we balangirira nti tufunye ekirwadde kya COVID-19. Mwami Museveni n'avaayo n'agamba ku lw'obulungi bwa bannansi tusooke tukole ki? Tusooke tuggalewo buli kimu. Naye ekyaddirira obuyambi bwonna ne bannansi bennyininyini be baawaayo n'obuyambi obwava mu mawanga ag'ebweru. N'olwaleero obulwadde butuuse okutukuba ffenna okututta okutumalawo. Tewali wadde akalumu bwe kati akazimbiddwa. Twebuuza sente ezaafunibwa, sente bannayuganda ze baasonda, buli kimu kye baasonda kye twasonda zaalagawa. Ffenna tukuba omulanga bannayuganda yonna gye muli. Munyikire okunaaba mu ngalo, munyikire okwambala masiki, naye ekyo kyokka tekimala. Twekwasa ne Mukama Katonda.
Twali tulina okugenda mu lockdown nga ne campaign tezinnabakola ki kubeerawo. Gye twali bale tuyita lockdown. Naye gwe oba wakkiriza abantu bagende mu campaigns, kitegeeza nti abatukulembera be baasiga ki ekintu ekyo.
Ekyamazima tubagamba gavumenti etubonyabonyezza tutuuse ne ku kiseera ekigamba tugende, naye ne gye tugenda nawo titumanyiyo. Abamu balaba n'obufaliso buli ku migongo, enjala eneetera kubatta, abapolisi bakugoba ekkubo lyomanyi ate bakugoba ogende mu kkubo ddala. Era nga bw'otulaba mu kkubo wano titujja kugamba mbu tugenda kwetoloola bwetolozi mu Kampala muno mpaka omukka bwe gunaagwamu wetufe bufi.
Kituufu obulwadde weebuli, naye pulezidenti alinga yawadde abasirikale omugano gw'okukola ki? Gw'okufuna ssente. Bali mu kufuna bufunyi ssente ku bantu mu kifo ky'okulwanyisa ekirwadde kino, ate nga bandibadde bateeka kasawa ya leero gavumenti yandibadde yeddiza amalwaliro ag'obwannannyini n'amasomero ag'obwannannyini. Singa ekirwadde kino kitwala emyaka nga 3 mu maaso, abaana baffe tebagenda kusoma. Tubadde tunaba mu ngalo, muntu muno yakugamba nti teekako masiki, yambala masiki. Nze ntambudde kuva mukono okuyingira ekibuga kino.
Abasirikale batugambye ffe ababooda kuvuga migugu, naye neebuuza kati olwaleero tubadde mu kibuga batugobaganyanga nte buli omu bamwagala waka, tulina okuvuga emigugu. Okitegeera kyetwabadde tumanyi tino kyetwazze okukola, naye kakati ssaawa ya leero buli wetupaakinga wonna wonna batugobaganyaawo.
I don't think that this was the right time for Mr. President to close, because some of the tenants are still being demanded by the landlords. Most of those ones who were renting the arcades, people are poor, no money in the country. We are being demanded last year's rent, and we have gone back in the lockdown. We don't know how to do. The rent is just going to accumulate, and the landlords, for them, they will not be able to forgive us. They don't want to hear that what.
I'm still appealing the government to look into health sector, and then it gives its first priority, because Ugandans are suffering out there because of health service delivery. There is no drugs in a hospital, government hospital. You find that now to access private, it is very expensive.
Abantu baffe tebalina kyakulya, tebalina bikozesebwa waka, kati y'omugalo yino zavudde buvi n'agamba kateekewo omugalo. Nze suubira nti abantu abamuwadde amagezi okuteeka ku muggalo kyabadde kye kisaana. yabadde ati atuleka ne tukuuma amateeka ga SOP ne twekuuma nga twambala masiki nga tunaaba mu ngalo naye ne tusigala abantu nga tukola. Tuweza kugamba nti omuntu akola emmere ya leero omuggadde agenda kulyawa ate nga tumuwadde na buyambi.
Of the citizens, you've heard it all. COVID is now the key priority. And as the Office of the Prime Minister, your role is to coordinate and supervise the other government departments, ministries and agencies. Service delivery is very important, is a very important tenet of the Office of the Prime Minister. COVID, as we speak, has left the economy in a tailspin, has affected SMEs. Many people have been, laid off in terms of employment. People do not have foodstuff. People are very anxious. People can't pay rent. And right now, as we speak, there's a lockdown. But of recent, the Prime Minister made a key pronouncement that there's going to be a stimuli that's going to be given to the most needy people, the underclass. The criteria as we speak is not yet, there's no clarity in who is going to get this money. No one knows. There's a bit of speculation about how much money is going to be given to each individual, what categories of people. Is it people who live in the slums? Is it the border people? How is it, this money, they say they are going to distribute it directly, and unlike in the past when they gave food. And there's talk that if you've ever received 500,000 shillings on your cell phone, then you're not entitled to this kind of money. And perhaps the argument is someone could have received tuition, someone could have received money to pass on to a friend, or could have received money that is not theirs. But Bwana Acting PS James Collins Dombo, what can you tell us about, basically everyone I think out there is anxious to know about the stimuli. When is it coming? How much is it going to be? And which categories of people, vulnerable people, are going to get this entitlement?
Well, thank you so much, Emmanuel, moderating this program. First of all, I want to say good evening to the viewers. I also want to thank you for inviting me to this program. Just like you have introduced me, I'm working with the Office of the Prime Minister as Acting Permanent Secretary. I first of all also want to congratulate my new bosses, the new Prime Minister and all the other political leaders who I believe as you move on, you'll have time to host, to give a little more and more clarity. On the subject that you asked me to comment on, first of all, the Office of Prime Minister, yes, coordinates government business, coordinates the implementation of government policies and programs, and in doing that, it brings together the actors to ensure that whatever is done in harmony, to harness the advantages, so that when we are implementing, we improve the efficiencies in terms of benefiting from each of the different organizations. Now, the issue of which is at hand, COVID-19, is a very serious matter, just like we all know. And His Excellency the President gave directives on how we should move during this period. Directives which were for the good of this country. His Excellency the President, after looking and seeing what is needed at this time, gave those directives. And after those directives were given, the different political actors and the different government actors have moved to ensure that these directives are implemented, they're enforced for the good of this country. And in his communication, the President did indicate that one of the areas that needed to be focused on
is to look at how the vulnerable communities can be helped during this period. I want to say that already the process is on. A number of meetings have taken place and still go on under the chair of the political leadership of this country. My boss, the Right Honorable Prime Minister, even today has been chairing a meeting. And what comes out through these meetings is still also supposed to be discussed, including being discussed in the cabinet. And thereafter, the country is going to be informed on the details of how the entire process is going to work. But I want to assure the country that everything that is being done for the good of this country. The government is aware of the suffering and all those issues that have been raised, and all effort is in place to see that we look for ways of doing things in a better way for the good of our communities.
Yeah, to bring in Marie, Marie Nanyanzi of Twaweza, you've been out there in the field gathering data. What are you collecting in regard to, what kind of data are you collecting in regard to issues related to COVID? Things to do with food safety, incomes of, you know, population and businesses, and how are the people coping, and what kind of data are you gathering out there?
Thank you, Emmanuel, and good evening, viewers. So at Twaweza, we have a program called Sauti za Wananchi, where we collect the citizens' voices and take them to the policymakers so that they know what is happening on the ground. And we have been doing this since 2017. In May last year, we tried to understand the challenges that Ugandans are facing, and one of them was to understand the level of food security within the households. And at that point in time, we noticed that there were a number of Ugandans were really worried about running out of food, that they will eat the same food over and not be able to change the diet as they would have loved to. And we asked the same questions in December. From all those areas where we're gauging the food security, that is, for example, were they worried they would run out of food? We observed that back in May, we had 70% of the population that was worried that they would run out of food. Then by December, the food stress levels had gone down, and this 53% were mentioning that they were worried they would run out of food, which shows us that post the lockdown, the situation was getting better. So for now, we cannot tell what is actually happening, but we have been collecting some data. We have not yet finished the study, but tentative data shows us that 31% say that they do not have enough food, or they don't have food at all in the home, because we try to understand, for the residents of Kampala, what do they think about the food availability in their homes at the moment. And that's where we saw that 31% say that they have no food at all. And when we compare that 31% with the feedback that we got in July last year, just as we were getting out of the lockdown, this figure was at 13%, which shows us that the situation is worse, that it's very likely that Ugandans were not able to get back to their original status before the lockdown, but they're just trying to really survive. And at the moment, it's getting worse because we know a number of people lost their jobs during the lockdown, and many were not able to get their jobs back. So it just goes to show us that at the moment, everyone is really waiting for that feedback to know, will they be able to qualify for that package? And the little information that we've got through the media has shown us that there will be the money or the package will be given through the mobile phone. And we know that less than 80% of Ugandan households have a mobile phone. So with that model, it's quite likely that those that don't have mobile phones will be left out, which will be a lot worse than those who didn't get food at all, because now those that are more vulnerable would probably miss out. So it's good to hear that the process is still being deliberated upon, and that what we hear at the moment is not the final stand. But from what we hear at the moment, it seems to pose a number of risks that were probably, that will make it worse than what we saw in the last year.
To bring in the PS, Mr. Dombo, she talks about the data, and one of the things she mentions is the issue of food scarcity. That a number of households do not have food as we speak. Now that brings in the context that Uganda has borrowed quite a lot of money, nearly $1 trillion from the IMF. We also had a fundraising campaign, but every time we read a report, the Auditor General's report, and the other kind of probes, they show that we've really not put this money to proper use. There are accountability issues, there are expenditures that cannot be explained. How important is that, and what are you doing as the overall coordinator, as the leader of government business, to ensure that every penny is accounted for? Because we are living in a very dire situation. Our hospitals do not have enough ICU beds. Our people are facing starvation. This is a kind of situation that we've never been prepared for.
Well, this is a subject that has been put out by right from His Excellency the President, the Right Honourable Prime Minister, and the different political leaders, and it has been very clear that to begin with, the issues raised that were found through the research and so on, the stress levels and how this has been moving on. First of all, yes, you talk about 31% in Kampala, according to what you found out. All this is what I was saying, that actually this is work going on. Because even as we continue to discuss, one of the things that is being worked out, what are the vulnerables. That alone is still being finalized. Who qualifies to be referred to as a vulnerable? And then number two, the modality of how they can be reached. Once the approvals are finished, then the process of how each and every one of these who has been identified should be reached is going to be properly outlined and put out. And this is going to come out very, very, very clearly. On issues of improvement in terms of accountability, I mean, it's unfortunate that sometimes information is put out there, including on social media and so on, sometimes which is not properly verified. For example, we want to continue to thank the public and all people who contributed responding to His Excellency the President's appeal last time. And I want to say very soon, you will be attending a function where the President will be coming out to thank the public, even as he hands over the different items and equipment that will have come out of these funds. No penny has been touched outside what it's meant to do. This is very, very clear. And all plans and all arrangements are on. You will definitely be informed, and the public will clearly be informed when the President is coming out to launch and show the public what these funds actually have been used to procure for the good of this country.
Thank you very much. You're watching Citizen Voices. Our hashtag is Amplifying Citizen Voices. And we're discussing the role of the Office of the Prime Minister and service delivery. We're going to take a commercial break and we'll be back. Welcome viewers, and you're watching Citizen Voices. With me is a panel of two in the studio, Marie Nanyanzi, who is from Twaweza, and the Acting Permanent Secretary, Mr. Dombo. But to join us by Zoom is the Minister for Relief, Disaster Preparedness and Refugees, Honorable Hilary Onek. And once again, we're discussing the role of the Office of the Prime Minister in terms of, its critical role to supervise ministries, government agencies, and departments. And as we speak now, the most relevant issue is the issue of the COVID pandemic and the lockdown. Honorable, definitely we know that government is, trying to roll out a number of, programs to come to the rescue of its citizens. And we've heard about the stimulus, but going by the past, we know this kind of thing we didn't prepare. No one knew COVID would strike, would burrow across our landscape and cause the kind of despair that we're seeing. But, and we know it's quite a logistical nightmare. But going by what we've done in the past, we bought a number of double cabin pickups, we did a number of things, and today, one of the most scarce items is oxygen and ICU beds and things of the sort. What kind of lessons have we learned, perhaps, from the mistakes we've made in the past, Honorable?
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, and viewers, dear viewers. Definitely, this is a second lockdown, and this lockdown is occasioning some challenges, particularly to those citizens who live from hand to mouth, and often their livelihood is cut off by the lockdown, and therefore it creates a disaster for them and generally of our concern. Now we have since this is a second lockdown, we had the first lockdown where a number of mistakes happened. One, the cost of logistics for the distribution of food that time, which was considered to be the way to go. And besides food, we had many other administrative costs, etc., which actually consumed a reasonable sum of the money that were intended for that relief. And
do we still have the Minister? Sorry about that, we've had a technical glitch, but we'll try and get back on Zoom. But to bring you in, Marie, citizens say some of their most serious challenges facing their households is the cost of living. And they list some of the three most serious problems that they are currently facing: the high cost of living, stroke inflation, lack of employment, and health facilities and diseases. Definitely the issue of health facilities, has spilled over in the context of COVID. That for Ugandans, whose the average GDP, whose GDP per capita GDP is $800, I think, dollars, which is roughly 2.5 million shillings a year, I expected, in case one's relative is sick with COVID, and they want to access treatment in a private hospital, where the ICU charges in the ICU department cost as high as nearly 2 million or 3 million shillings, it just doesn't make sense that if average GDP per capita is $800, which is the money that one earns across the year, roughly about 2.5 to 8 million shillings, depending on the fluctuation of the dollar, then you expect that person to pay such a kind of bill to seek treatment if they are sick or their relative. And the issue of the high cost of living has been amplified by the loss of jobs, lack of employment. What do you have to say about that, Marie?
Thank you, Emma. So yes, it's a challenge, and we have seen that consistently, at least between 2019 and 2020, those have been the most serious problems facing Ugandans, both at the household and also at when they look at the country as a whole. That is the health services, the lack of employment, and then the issue of inflation. And when we look at the inflation, of the first thing that really comes to mind is the price of food. Because if you look at that basket, you'll be looking at probably energy and so on, but food is really the key thing that most Ugandans will access. So my comment on this would be that yes, we have seen a lot being said about the agricultural sector, that what should be done, but then we need to do a lot more to ensure that this sector is also monitored closely, the control of quality of inputs, issues to do with the storage facilities, which we heard about last year. I think around the budget time, there was a talk of pumping more money into Uganda Development Bank so that farmers can be able to access that. But over time, we've also heard through media that some of that money did not actually get to UDB, or if it did, it was used for something else. So I believe that there is a lot more that should be done. Maybe the money is there, but there is a need to block the leakages in that sector so that Ugandans up to the grassroots can be able to benefit better from the monies allocated to agriculture. Then when we look at the most serious problem facing the country as a whole, that is health. This one we see that there is a slight shift between what Ugandans look at the most serious problem for the country and then for the household. For the household, this becomes the third priority. But when you're looking at it at a country level, it becomes the first priority, which could be an indication that because we have about 50% that seek government health facilities, then the other 50 probably have that as less of a most serious problem because they can possibly afford it. But given the current pandemic and the exorbitant rates in the private facilities, then we anticipate that health being a concern is really going to shoot up. And there is a need to have quick action around this. And as the Office of the Prime Minister, we don't know what you would like to probably say about that in terms of being more responsive. It's terrible that the minister has dropped off, but it would be good if at all he would give us what kind of response does the ministry have in terms of this health disaster that is happening at the moment.
Thank you, Marie. Sorry, I don't know whether we've gotten the minister back, but it was really a glitch, and I think he really meant to be part of the program. So we hope that he'll be joining us possibly in the next few minutes. But to bring in the acting PS, Mr. Dombo, the Office of the Prime Minister, beyond the issues in regard to the COVID pandemic, it plays a number of other roles in terms of effective service delivery, strategic coordination and implementation. We've seen where you're trying to innovate with the Prime Minister's delivery unit to deliver services to the grassroots. You have programs like the Presidential Investors Roundtable. You have a program to do with sustainable development goals and other projects such as NUSAF. As the new government takes off, you now have a new Right Honorable Prime Minister. What should we expect in terms of improvement of service delivery? Because that's one of the key questions that at the end of the 5-year term of this government, that you're going to be put on a kind of pedestal. The constituents or the electorate will ask, what is that you've done for them?
Well, thank you so much, Emmanuel. Yes, we've just received the new political leaders, and as you know, government has just started a five-term. the process is just starting now. But the Prime Minister has been very, very clear. Right Honorable Robina Nabanja has been very clear for the few days she has communicated on this. She has said government is going to deliver. And government is just not going to deliver from the high level, but government is going to deliver down to the grassroots. I may just share a few things in between from the time she's just been in the office. Right now, we've been on this issue of COVID, as you all know. COVID is a pandemic that came. I should say that not everything was planned around it, because like this second wave, it has just come and hit the country. But you have talked about the cost of treatment in the private facilities. I want first of all to thank the private facility providers for the effort that they have put in to supplement what government is doing to ensure that the people have a living, the people get life. We thank them. However, yesterday when I was listening to the prayers that took place in the State House, when I was listening to the talk that was, the speeches that were given, a number of measures, a number of areas have been proposed where government can still work in collaboration with the private sector to ensure that actually a number of things can be addressed, to see how best the cost probably can be mitigated. And I hope with further engagement, this is going to work out. I want to say I was privileged. I also discussed this with the officials from Ministry of Health as the Office of Prime Minister, and Ministry of Health is already engaging with the private providers, the providers of health services, to see how best government can be supportive and in the process so that the cost can then be moderated so that our people can get the services. But you have asked the question in a wider form that what is government going to do to ensure that really the issue is service delivery for our people. Service delivery for the people must improve. That's the whole thing. Now, the Office of Prime Minister ideally is charged with ensuring that actually there is coordination amongst the players, amongst the MDAs, to ensure that the services are provided and provided at the most efficient, cost, for example. And how do we see this happening? One, by ensuring that we remove the duplications if at all they are there, because then there should be synergies between the different MDAs to ensure that really operation.
How far have you gone with the issue of implementing the fusion of some of these duplicated?
Yes, the cabinet already made a decision on this one, and as I should just say that actually now the process is on, the implementation is on. The implementation is going on. I cannot outline now, but because this was a government-wide process, and the process is on to ensure that there is rationalization amongst the different agencies to ensure that there is improved service delivery, but at a regulated cost.
Just to ask you one more question. We see these very rosy programs put on paper, and every election cycle, the government comes up with all sorts of catchphrases, Bonabagagawale, and all these things. We see people appointed. What is that magic wand that you're going to do in a special manner to see that you deal with soaring youth unemployment, to deal with addressing issues of abject poverty at the grassroots, ensuring that we have more hospitals, we have better quality of education in this term.
Well, that the whole thing is really having proper coordination across government. Once you have proper coordination across government, then you will have the proper identification of the issues to deal with. You will have clear prioritization within the resources that are available, and you will have that delivery will be done where it's supposed to be. A number of programs, government is coming up with a number of programs to see that these areas that you have just mentioned are addressed. The time is too short to outline all those programs, but what I can assure is that even from the budget recently from the budget speech as it was given, you realize that actually these very areas are being targeted. The best way of dealing with unemployment, of course, is looking for ways of increasing production. The president has been talking about industrialization and opening factories, so that the more of these industries that are actually opened, the more we have employment, for example, for our youth, and looking for the different ways of engaging them. All these processes, I'm sure, really are going on, and we shall definitely have time to see that the process is done.
Marie, to bring you in just quickly to sum this up, what are the views of citizens about the future of the economy and a personal living situation as we wrap this up?
Okay. Thank you, Emmanuel. But before I do that wrapping up, I would like to just go back to the last comment you mentioned about the different programs and the youth being able to access those. The data that we have at the moment does show that 75% of Ugandans do not know where to go when they want to start a business, and the few that know, about 14%, say that they will go to their LC1. So just for you to think about how best can we improve the access to information, especially considering that the LC1 has a lot of power or a lot of respect in their community, because besides education, health, and water, all the other services that you could probably think about, people are saying that they will run first to the LC1 to seek information, which shows us that yes, there are a lot of programs, interesting programs that will help our people, but the people don't know. So maybe it's about time to think deeper about how do we utilize this this power or this capacity that the LC1 has to ensure that these programs actually thrive. Then to go back to Emma's question, so what we see in our data, that is between December 2019 and 2020, we just asked Ugandans looking ahead the next 12 months, what do they expect to be compared? Now, we did see that 38% said that they expect the national economic conditions to get better. This does not differ much from what they mentioned in 2019. And then when it came to the personal living conditions, still we did see that 50% expected that the situation will get better. Those that are saying it will get worse had actually reduced. So in spite of all the challenges that Ugandans have, they have not given up. They are still hopeful that some good will come out of this in the months ahead. So we really hope that the new cabinet, the new ministers, in all the different positions, that they'll be able to deliver and meet Ugandans' expectations.
Mr. Pierce, perhaps in 1 minute, for efficient service delivery, we expect government to be frugal, cut out wastage in terms of expenditure, travel abroad, that's not necessary, luxurious cars and all these kind of things, inefficiencies. What should we expect now that we're at such a critical time of the COVID pandemic? Within a minute, please.
Well, of course, now the emphasis is on ensuring that there is improvement in health, so that we provide for everybody to improve the services under the health conditions. And then, of course, after that is also to be frugal, to ensure that whatever resources are available, they are put to proper use, to ensure that actually we have life improved for all Ugandans. I want to say that the new Prime Minister has made this very clear, that she's not going to be an office Prime Minister. She has already put us on notice, some of us, the technical officials who are working with her. There is going to be a lot of monitoring of government programs to ensure that everything is done to...
Thank you, Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
In a minute or less, Marie, graft is a problem. We have quite a bloated government. We have lots of wastage. And in fact, people say we're a rich country. What should be the key priorities from the findings of your research as we wrap this up?
Thank you so much. So as we wrap up, we believe that the key priority for the government at the moment is really the health issues that should be tackled, and the issue of inflation and then unemployment. Because if we continue having the inflation, then the food stress will continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Dear viewers, you've been watching Citizen Voices. Right here, I've been your host, Emmanuel Mutaiziwa from the Serena Conference Center. Have a good evening. And as expected, we'll be having another show in the next Saturday, same time. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.